Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
The flashlight beam was a searing star in the darkness, pinning me against the cheap mattress. My heart hammered against my ribs as my eyes, still blurry with sleep, struggled to make sense of the shadowy figures looming over me. Cold metal clicked shut around my wrists. The sound was deafening in the sudden, tense silence of the room. I was terrified, my mind racing. I was just sleeping, fully clothed. There were no drugs, no booze. Why was I in handcuffs? "Excuse me, officer," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Why are we being handcuffed?" "For our safety while we conduct a search," he grunted back. A moment later, a gruff voice cut through the room. It was the chief of police. "You're all being charged. Contributing to the delinquency of a minor and cohabitation." That's when Chloe spoke up, her voice clear and defiant. "Daddy, if you arrest Alex for that, you have to arrest me too. My birthday was last week. I'm not a minor anymore." The chief of police was her father. He froze, his face a mask of fury as he unlocked my cuffs. "All of you get out. Now." Scrambling to leave, I couldn't find my other shoe. "Go," he roared, before I changed my mind. I dropped the one shoe I'd found and fled into the pre-dawn gloom. My world turned completely upside down. It all started a year earlier with a simple bet I made with my father. It was the sweltering midsummer of 1971 in Wilmington, North Carolina, just before my sophomore year at Cape Fear High School was set to begin. I didn't know a soul. We'd moved around so much with my dad's Army career that making friends felt like a skill I'd never mastered. I figured it was pointless to even try until school started. I just hoped I could find a few good friends, maybe even a best friend. My dad, Frank, and I were walking to the school for pre-registration. We didn't have a car, and he insisted the walk was good for me. "You'll probably have to get your hair cut," he grumbled, eyeing my hair, which was just starting to touch my ears. His Army buddies had filled his head with stories about strict school dress codes. I, however, had done my own reconnaissance, noticing plenty of guys around town with hair much longer than mine. I saw an opportunity. "I'll make you a bet," I said, trying to sound confident. "If the school says I have to cut my hair, I'll cut it and join JROTC, no questions asked. But if I don't have to cut it, then you can't hassle me about my hair anymore. The final word is mine." A grin spread across his face like he'd just hit the jackpot. "I'll take that bet," he said. We shook on it, a firm, binding deal. At the school, after Frank checked me in, I made a point to ask the registrar about the dress code. "Is there a rule about hair length for boys?" "No, dear," she said with a smile. "Not unless you're in JROTC. Are you interested in that?" I turned to my dad, my own smile widening into a triumphant grin. "No way," I said. "You lose." On the walk home, I asked if he was going to honor our bet. Frank looked at me with a stern pride. "The only thing a man has that no one can take from him is his word. You can only give it away, and when you do, you keep it. I will honor our bet." We shook on it. I knew he hated losing, but his code of honor was absolute. It was one of the most important lessons he ever gave me. When school finally began, I did start to meet a few people. I didn't need to be the most popular kid, just to have a couple of close friends. But there was another friend who was always with me, the girl in the mirror. I tried to be careful, but my curiosity sometimes got the better of me. One evening, after Frank, my stepmom Brenda, and the two kids went out for a walk, I slipped into their bedroom. I just wanted to try on one of her lipsticks. I was twisting the tube of Crimson Kiss when I heard the front door open. I scrambled to put it back, but it was too late. Brenda caught me running from her room. There was no point in lying. I liked the color," I stammered. "I had to try it." She looked at me for a long moment, then went and got the lipstick. She held it out to me. "You like it, you can have it. It's yours." I felt like I was dreaming. I took the tube of crimson lipstick, my very first piece of makeup. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. Back in my room, I put it on and walked out to the kitchen to show Frank and Brenda. I wasn't going to hide who I was at home anymore. The inner me was coming out. Frank, of course, was less than thrilled. I had earned several master's degrees from his board of education, the wooden paddle he used to try and beat the femininity out of me. But he couldn't. Eventually, he just seemed to give up. As long as I could be myself at home, I felt a small victory. Still, I knew I had to be careful at school. I couldn't let anyone see the real me, the person who felt more like a girl than a boy. I came up with a plan. Thanks to my victory in the bet with Frank, I could grow my hair out. I would become a long-haired hippie. It was the perfect disguise. My dad even helped solidify my new male persona, though not intentionally. He found out I was smoking and confronted me in the way only a career army man could. He threw a pack of cigarettes on the table. "You want to smoke? Then smoke. In front of me. Light one up and keep lighting them until I tell you to stop." I lit the first one. "No problem." "Another," he ordered. The second one made me a little dizzy. I could see his plan, make me so sick I'd never want another cigarette. But I was determined to win this battle of wills. I smoked a third, a fourth, a fifth. By the sixth, I was fighting back nausea. I pushed through, and after my 12th cigarette in a row, he finally called it quits. "Not so fast," he said as I staggered toward the sofa. "You need to take the dog out. You can have a smoke if you want." "No thanks," I mumbled, feeling sick. He just laughed. "If you need a pack, get one from my carton. Just don't take the last one." As I pulled the last cigarette from my lips, I saw the faint, perfect imprint from the Crimson Kiss lipstick. I liked it. I knew wearing lipstick at home was here to stay. But the girl in the mirror felt incomplete. She needed a name. Alex was all wrong. I could have been named Alexis, a name that works for a boy or a girl, but my aunt had her son first and claimed it. I felt like I'd lost out. Still, I could use Lex as a nickname. It felt right. For now, I would be Lex. "Alex, what's up?" The voice snapped me out of my daydream. It was Leo, a guy from my history class. I'd been so lost in thought I hadn't even heard him approach. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I don't really respond to that name. It's what my dad calls me when he's mad." "Oh, sorry man," he said. "Don't want to call you, hey you. What should I call you?" "Lex," I replied, hoping it would stick. "Lex. Cool. I like it," he said with an easy smile. "Hey, wanna come over after school and hang out for a while?" "Sure," I said, surprised and pleased. "I just need to call home first." After school, I found out Leo wasn't kidding when he said he lived close. His house was on another level entirely, a big, two-story colonial that backed right onto the 7th fairway of the local country club. My dad, Frank, had taken a job at the power company because his army retirement wasn't enough to support his new family in a trailer park. The contrast was jarring, but Leo didn't seem to care where I lived or what my dad did for a living. We went up to his room, and he picked up a guitar and started playing. He was incredible. Songs I knew from the radio flowed from his fingertips, and they all sounded perfect. "Dude, you're amazing," I said, genuinely impressed. He grinned and handed the guitar to me. "Your turn." "No way," I said, pulling back. "I've never even held one. I don't know how to play." "Sure you do," he insisted. "I'll prove it." He showed me where to put my fingers on the frets to make any chord. "Now, just strum." I did, and a messy but recognizable chord filled the room. It was the first note of music I had ever made. "See? I told you," he said. "You just have to learn, and I can teach you. If you want." "If you really think I can learn," I said, my heart racing with a new kind of excitement, "I definitely want to." Later, his mother came up to see what we were doing. When Leo told her he was going to teach me to play guitar, she smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. Jim, do you need to use the phone to call for a ride?" "We, don't have a car," I admitted. "I guess I'll walk." "Nonsense," she said immediately. "It'll be dark soon, and hitchhiking is too dangerous. I'll give you a ride home." Leo shot his mom a look. "Dad's not going to like that. He thinks having friends without valid transportation is beneath our standing." "Not all of your father's views are correct," she said firmly, looking at me. "And I let him know when he's wrong. He is wrong on this matter. Get ready to go, Lex." I turned to Leo, feeling a flash of embarrassment. "Sorry, I didn't realize I was beneath your standing." Don't worry about it, Leo said, rolling his eyes. My dad's a snob. It doesn't matter to me. Besides, it's fun to watch my mom put him in his place. The ride to the trailer park was quiet, but spoke volumes. When we pulled up, his mom insisted on walking me to the door to speak with my parents. I'm home, I called out, opening the door. This is Leo's mom. Frank came into the living room. Thank you for bringing our boy home, he said. My son will be teaching yours to play the guitar, she explained. So don't worry if he's not home right after school sometimes. I'll make sure he gets home safely. I think it will be good for them, doing something positive. Frank agreed, but I saw the unease in his eyes. He knew about my thing for dressing up, my feminine side. The idea of me spending so much time with another boy worried him. He was probably right to be worried. I did like Leo, but his friendship meant more to me than anything. I decided then that I would use him as a role model, a way to perfect the male persona I needed to survive. I was making other friends, too. Through Leo, I met a brother and sister, Mark and Megan, who lived a couple of streets over. My growing hair, however, was a constant source of irritation for Frank. He'd grumble about it, and I'd just remind him of our bet. Eventually, it got long enough, bangs in my eyes, past my earlobes, and over my collar, that I figured a small trim wouldn't hurt. The next time he asked, I agreed. It was a disaster. He took me to a barber shop, and, despite my clear instructions, just a trim, get the bangs out of my eyes, don't take too much off the sides, the barber took his clippers and buzzed a high, tight line above my ear, wiping out 3 inches of hard-won growth in an instant. I was furious. I let that barber know exactly how I felt, my voice shaking with rage. I can leave it like that if you want, he said, bewildered. Match the other side, I hissed through clenched teeth. And just trim the back. 1/4 of an inch. Got it. I stormed out of that place, vowing to never set foot in another barbershop again. The long-haired hippie persona was officially delayed. A few days later, I was hanging out with Leo, Mark, and Megan. How are the guitar lessons going? Mark asked. Slowly, I admitted. I don't have a guitar to practice on, and the lack of transportation makes it hard to stay at Leo's. Can't help you with a guitar, Mark said, but I do have an older bike you can use. It's a 1-speed, so it can be tough to pedal sometimes, but it'll solve your transportation problem. Far out, I said, trying out my hippie slang. He let me take it for a test ride, and when we got back, his dad came out and made it official. You can have the bike, he said, on the condition that you obey all the traffic laws. And you must have a white light on the front if you're riding at night. Do you accept? Yes, sir, I replied, my heart soaring. I accept. Thank you. The bike was a game changer. A few days later, after a lesson, I was struggling to tape an old flashlight to the handlebars when Leo's mom saw me. What are you trying to do? She asked. I explained how I'd almost run off the road the other night, and she just nodded. The next time I came over, she had an early birthday present for me, a brand new bike light with its own generator. You need this now, she said simply. My hair started to grow back, and I shot up 2 inches over the school year, maxing out at a modest 5 feet 4 inches. It was then that something new started happening. At a store, a clerk would say, "May I help you, miss?" followed by a quick, embarrassed, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were a woman." At first, it made me angry. But as it kept happening, I had to face the truth. With my slight build, 115-pound frame, minimal facial hair, and long hair, I could easily be mistaken for a girl. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't mind. If having long hair meant people saw me as more feminine, then so be it. The anger was replaced by a quiet, surprising sense of acceptance. My birthday arrived, and with it, a surprise from Leo. He presented me with a worn, slightly beat-up acoustic guitar. It was my first one, he said. So you can practice over the summer. I was floored. Thanks, man. I'll take good care of it. Summer finally broke free, and I was drawn to the coast. I started spending all my time at Carolina Beach, crashing with a guy I knew from school, Kyle, and a couple of other friends. But I hated being a freeloader, so after a few days of bouncing between couches, I found myself wide awake in a 24-hour diner at 3 in the morning, nursing a cup of coffee. A guy named Kevin, the kitchen helper on the graveyard shift, looked at me with exhausted eyes. "Hey, can you help me out?" he asked. "Could you cover my shift Friday night? 10 to 6. I've never had a job, I admitted. I don't know what to do. It's easy, he insisted. George, the cook, will tell you what you need to do. Please? I really need the night off. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll give it a try. I hitched a ride home as the sun was rising, exhausted but buzzing with a new purpose. Frank was in the kitchen when I walked in. "Dad, I've got good news. I'm going to fill in for a guy at that all-night restaurant at the beach on Friday." A rare, genuine smile spread across his face. He looked proud. "A job? Not bad. Only 4 days into summer break and you've landed a job." "I'm just filling in," I clarified. "Do your best," he said, puffing out his chest. "Work hard and stay busy. Trust me, the boss will notice, and you might get a real job out of it." I was stunned when he added, "First night, you don't want to be late. I'll give you a ride down there." As I got ready that Friday afternoon, showering, washing my hair, putting on clean jeans, I had to laugh to myself. Frank thought this job would finally knock the girliness out of me and turn me into a man. He had no idea my first priority was to use the money I earned to buy makeup. Frank dropped me off 5 minutes early. "Early is good, late is bad," he said, the old military mantra still etched into his brain. I thanked him for the ride and walked into the bright, humming diner. It felt different being there to work, not just to loiter over coffee. My career almost ended before it began. A waitress with a name tag that read Sarah stopped me before I could even get to the kitchen. "Sorry, honey," she said, pointing at my feet. "You can't work in flip-flops. Health code." I turned to look for Frank, but his car was already gone. It wouldn't have mattered. My only other pair of shoes were old sneakers with the soles peeling off. "I was going to get a new pair before school," I mumbled, dejected. "Tell Kevin I'm sorry I let him down." As I turned to leave, the other waitress, a kind-faced woman named Alice, stopped me. "Hold on. Let's see if we can figure something out. What size do you wear?" Small to medium?" I said, looking down at my flip-flops. Sarah let out a laugh. "Not those, silly. Your regular shoe size." "A boy's size 5, I said. Sarah was still chuckling. "Alice, a boy's 5 is a girl's 7. You're in luck, that's my size. I just got a new pair, my old work shoes are in the car. I'll go get them." She handed me the sturdy, black, non-slip shoes a moment later. "You'll need to wear these socks, too," she added, passing me a pair of white athletic socks, "or you'll have blisters by morning." I hesitated. The part of me I called Lex was screaming, "Take them," but I was supposed to be Alex, the new kitchen helper. Still, I needed to work. "I guess I don't have a choice," I said, accepting the socks and shoes. A funny thing happened on my way to get ready. I was told to put my flip-flops in a locker in the men's room and grab a white work shirt from the closet in the hallway. In my haste, I grabbed a folded white garment that, at a glance, looked like a shirt. It wasn't. It was a white work dress. I didn't realize my mistake until I was trying to pull it on while walking back toward the dining room. "I seem to be too small to fit into this," I said, utterly confused, holding up the dress. Alice and Sarah burst out laughing. "Silly, that's a dress," Mary said, trying to catch her breath. "Let's get you a proper shirt," Alice said kindly, leading me back to the closet. "You just made a mistake. No harm, no foul." The rest of the shift was a blur of dirty dishes, clattering plates, and shouted orders from George, the cook. I did everything he told me to, and when a lull came after the bars closed, I noticed the shelves behind the booths were grimy. On my own initiative, I scrubbed them clean. In the morning, the owner, a stern-looking man named Mr. Thompson, came in. "Who are you?" "Where's Kevin?" he barked. I explained the situation. As I was talking, his eyes fell on the gleaming shelves. "Did Kevin ask you to clean that?" "No, sir. I just noticed it needed to be done and I had the time," I said. He stared at me for a long moment. "I asked him to do that twice. He's also missed a day of work every week since he started. I was going to let him go after this weekend anyway. The job is yours if you want it. 6 days a week, 25 cents over minimum wage." My head was spinning. "Yes, sir. I'll take it." "Good. Now, I need these shoes to work until I can buy my own, I said, turning to Alice. You can have them, she said with a smile. Mr. Thompson overheard. Here, he said, handing me some cash. I'm paying you for last night. No need to wait on Kevin. Be here at 9:45 tonight. He then went to his office and came back with a small padlock and key. Get an employee locker for your things. That's what they're for. I got a locker, swapped the work shoes for my flip-flops, and started the long walk home, my mind buzzing. It was official. I had a summer job. I hitched a ride home, the events of the night swirling in my head. I had a job, a locker, and a pair of borrowed women's shoes that had saved me. When I walked into the trailer, Frank was at the kitchen table. It was my first and last night filling in, I announced. Mr. Thompson offered me the job. I could see him trying to hide his pride. I told you, he said, that familiar refrain. Hard work gets you noticed. I need a legal ID from the state for the paperwork, I said, seeing my opening. Since I passed driver's ed, maybe I could get my driver's license? No, he said flatly. I let you take driver's ed so you'd know how to drive, not so you could get a license before you're 18. We'll get you a state ID. The matter is closed. I knew better than to argue. A state ID would work. The next evening, I left early. I had to stop and buy some more of those athletic socks, and I had no idea how long it would take to get a ride at 6 p.m. It took nearly 3 hours. I was still early, but I knew I couldn't rely on hitchhiking every day. When Alice and Sarah arrived at the diner, Alice was holding a small bag. I hoped you'd be back, she said. So I brought you a few old white shirts that might fit. My son outgrew them. Thanks, I said. I didn't see any men's smalls in the closet yesterday. Oh, and you should know, Sarah chimed in, Mr. Thompson doesn't allow jeans. You should be wearing black slacks or white pants. She looked me up and down. I have a few pairs of basic black slacks you can have. I'd have to take them in, though. You're even smaller than me. Thank you both so much, I said, genuinely touched. I can't afford a whole new work wardrobe. Sarah, you can take whatever measurements you need. They teamed up, Alice writing down the numbers as Sarah called them out with the measuring tape. Waist 26, hips 32, inseam 28. I went to the men's room to change. I pulled one of the shirts from the bag. The arms fit perfectly, but when I went to button it, I realized it was a women's blouse. It was very plain and could easily pass for a guy's shirt, except for the fact that it buttoned on the left side instead of the right. Alice must have known. She probably figured if I didn't mind wearing women's shoes, a blouse wouldn't be a problem. And she was right. I buttoned it up and tucked it into my jeans. I pulled my hair back into a ponytail, but because of that disastrous haircut, I couldn't wear it low at the base of my neck like most guys. To gather the shorter sides, I had to tie it higher up, halfway up the back of my head, sticking out of the gap in my baseball cap. I looked in the mirror. With the blouse and the high ponytail, Lex was happy. This was the closest she'd ever been to being out in the real world. That Saturday night was insane. The bar rush hit us like a tidal wave. For over an hour, the diner was a chaotic storm of people and plates. I worked harder than I ever had in my life, my arms aching as I tried to keep up with the mountain of dishes. I finished my shift 15 minutes late, convinced Mr. Thompson would be angry. Instead, he clapped me on the shoulder. Only 15 minutes over on a night we broke $1,200? Good job, son. Kevin would still be washing dishes at 7 a.m. on a night like this. He paused. Just one thing. I meant what I said about the jeans. Yes, sir, I replied. Sarah is altering some slacks for me. Good, he said. When a shift breaks 1,200, the crew gets an extra meal. Enjoy it. I was sitting at the employee table, basking in the praise and smoking a much-needed cigarette, when Alice and Sarah joined me. That's Derek, Alice said, waving over a guy who had just walked in. The one I told you about. He was tall, at least 6 feet 3 inches, with a rugged, handsome face, green eyes, and a mustache with a goatee. His dark hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. He looked to be in his early 20s. He extended a calloused hand. I'm Derek. You must be Alex. It's Lex, I said, shaking his firm, strong hand. Straight to the point. I like that, he said with a grin. Alice said you need a place. I rent a room with its own bathroom, which is a big deal in that house. It's got one bed and a fold-down sofa. You could have the sofa. The rent is $45 a week. I was thinking we could split it $25 for me, $20 for you, since I get the bed. It's only 2 blocks from here. Want to see it after you eat? My meal had just arrived. Sounds good, I said, my heart pounding with the possibility of it all. Let me eat this, and I'll take a look. The free meal tasted better than any food I'd ever had. As I finished, Alice and Sarah came over and pressed some crumpled bills into my hand. $12, Alice said. We tip you for bussing our tables on busy nights. Derek and I walked the 2.5 blocks to the rooming house. The room was small and sparse, with a single bed, a fold-down sofa, and a square folding table with 2 chairs. Show me how this sofa works, I said. If it's going to be my bed, I need to know. Does that mean you'll take it? He asked with a hopeful grin. $20 a week for a place to sleep, a bathroom, and my own key, just a short walk from work and the ocean. It was more than I could have hoped for. Yeah, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. It's exactly what I need. I pulled out my wallet to give him the first week's rent. I had the $12 in tips and the $14 Mr. Thompson had given me for Friday night. After I handed Derek a $20, I was left with $6 to my name. He must have seen the look on my face. Hey, if you need to wait until you get your first real paycheck, that's cool, he said. No, it's fine, I said, suddenly remembering. I just forgot Mr. Thompson still has to pay me for tonight. As I handed him the money, my eyes landed on the cluttered card table, takeout bags, empty cups, a greasy wrapper. The new, clean freak part of my brain, conditioned by just 2 nights in a professional kitchen, took over. I just started clearing it off. Derek laughed. Sorry, man. I was gonna do that. It's okay, I said, laughing too. Have it, I guess. He handed me a key to the padlock on the door. I'll get a copy of the front door key made and drop it off at the diner for you. I went back to the restaurant and found Mr. Thompson. Sir, I just wanted to let you know I found a room to share, so my transportation problem is solved. Good, he said, looking pleased. I was wondering how you were going to manage that. You left in such a hurry you forgot this. He handed me my pay for the night. On the long hitchhike home, I felt a profound shift. I had a job. I had a place to live. I was making my own money and solving my own problems. I was becoming independent. I walked into the trailer and told Frank my plan. I explained that sharing a room at the beach made more sense than risking being late for work every night. He looked at me, his face a mixture of concern and reluctant approval. It does make sense, he conceded. But don't let this little bit of freedom from house rules cause you to forget that when you come back, you'll still be under my roof. Yes, sir, I said. It's just for the summer. The next Monday, he took off work late to help me get my state ID. When he dropped me back at the trailer, he gave me a stern look. Work hard. Try not to get into any trouble. I grabbed my bag, said a quick goodbye to Brenda, and walked out the door, heading for my new life. I picked up the key at the diner, let myself into the room, and saw a note on the now-clean card table. Lex, left you the bottom dresser drawer. It's behind the bathroom door. Welcome to the room. Derek. I put my things away and looked out the window. The sun was high and hot. I still had nearly 11 hours before my shift started. I decided it was time to check out the beach. I walked out the door and turned left. Within a minute, the street ended and the world opened up. I stepped onto the sand and saw the ocean for the first time up close. The endless blue, the roar of the waves breaking on the shore, the salty mist carried on the breeze, it was overwhelming. I just stood there for a long time, watching the constant, powerful rhythm of the tide, feeling the immense possibility of the summer ahead. The heat was intense. I decided to cool off in the ocean, but I didn't have swim trunks. I wasn't about to strip down to my jockey shorts, so I figured I'd just wade in with my jeans. I spotted a couple of girls sunbathing on towels nearby. Excuse me, I said, feeling a little awkward. Would you mind watching my t-shirt and flip-flops while I take a dip? Sure, no problem, one of them said with a friendly smile. I kicked off my flip-flops, noticing how scorching the sand was peeled off my t-shirt, and made a dash for the water. The coolness of the seawater meeting my hot feet was instant relief. Then I felt the undertow, the current pulling the sand out from under me. I took a few more steps and a wave broke right in front of me, soaking my jeans to mid-thigh. I turned my back to the sun and took one more step, right as a much bigger wave bore down on me. I dove into it, feeling the cool water envelop my entire body. The relief was immediately replaced by disorientation. I didn't know which way was up, down, or back to shore. Panic flared in my chest. I bent my legs, desperately hoping to find the bottom. Luckily, it wasn't that deep. I found my footing and pushed myself up, gasping for air just as my lungs began to burn. The wave had turned me 90 degrees. I quickly reoriented myself and headed back to the shore, my brief swim concluded. I grabbed my t-shirt and slid my right foot into its flip-flop. It was cool. But when I slid my left foot into the other, I yelped. Wow, that's hot. The girls who had watched my stuff laughed knowingly. You gotta turn them over so the sun heats the bottoms, one of them explained. It was a classic newbie mistake. Back at the room, my waterlogged jeans felt like they weighed a ton. I decided my spare pair, which already had a small hole forming in the knee, would be better served as cut-off shorts. I changed and, taking my wet clothes and my other t-shirt, went to find the laundromat. On the way, I stopped at a convenience store for a soda. As I was walking out the door, I heard the clerk call after me, "Glad to have been helpful, miss." I froze for a split second. I heard him. I knew what he'd said. But I didn't turn back. I didn't correct him. I just kept walking. It wasn't the first time I'd been mistaken for a girl, but it was the first time the person hadn't corrected themselves, and the first time I hadn't felt the need to correct them either. It wasn't a big deal, but it was a small step on a long road. I no longer cared if someone thought I was a woman. I found the laundromat, did my small load of wash, and on the way back, stopped for a foot-long chili dog. It was almost 4 p.m. by the time I got back to the room. I set my alarm for 9 p.m. and crashed for a nap. I woke to the sound of the door opening. It was Derek. "What time is it?" I asked, panicked that I'd overslept. 8:15, he replied. "Glad to see you made it here okay. Did you do anything today or just sleep?" I took my first dip in the ocean and got a hot foot from my flip-flop, I admitted. He roared with laughter. "A hot foot? That's a classic newbie mistake." "Yeah, well, a girl on the beach told me the trick," I said. "A girl with a very nice pair of sunglasses." Derek raised an eyebrow. "A nice pair, huh? Did you get a good view?" "Almost," I grinned. I had to turn away so I didn't stare, and my feet were starting to burn. A man's got to have his priorities. We both laughed. It felt good easy. I got to work early enough to eat. I was on my second cup of coffee when Alice and Sarah arrived. Sarah was carrying a bag. "Your work uniform will be complete," she said, handing it to me. "Thank you," I said, my relief palpable. "You have no idea how much this helps." I went to the men's room and pulled out a pair of the altered slacks. To my relief, they had a zipper in the front. They did, however, button on the girls' side. But I knew that once I put the apron on, no one would ever be able to tell. I put them on, along with the plain white blouse Alice had given me. I pulled my hair into its high ponytail, put on my cap, and slid the apron over my head. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a proper restaurant employee. And I was the only one who knew the secret to my uniform. The days settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, sleep, and on my days off, explore. My life was contained within a few blocks of Carolina Beach, and for the first time, it felt entirely my own. After a few days of sleeping off the exhaustion of the night shift, I ventured out to the boardwalk. It was a classic beach scene, shops selling saltwater taffy and cheap souvenirs on one side, a tall sandy dune blocking the view of the ocean on the other. At the far end, I found a kitschy mini-golf course called Safariland, lorded over by a giant, muscle-posing gorilla statue. I knew I'd be spending a lot of time there. Walking back, I found what would become my home away from home, Richie's Recreation, a sprawling pool hall filled with the sounds of clacking balls, ringing pinball machines, and teenagers shouting over foosball games. It was the heart of the local youth scene, and I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I was watching a heated foosball game when one of the players, a guy I'd never seen before, looked over at me. "Hey you, wanna be my partner?" Need someone to challenge for the table. I've never played before, I admitted. No better time to learn, he said. You play goalie, I'll play forward. He was good. We won, and under the house rules, losers pay, we kept the table. We won the next 5 games before finally being defeated. Not bad for a greenhorn, my partner said, clapping me on the shoulder before disappearing back into the crowd. I was looking at the guy racking the balls at a nearby pool table. He had a surfer's build and hair down to the middle of his back. He looked over and smiled. My name's Ethan, he said, walking over. I saw you holding down the foosball table. Good run. How long you been playing? That was actually my first time, I replied. No way, he said, impressed. I know you're new around here. I think I saw you working at the captain's table last Saturday night. I explained how I'd lucked into the job. Mr. Thompson offered you a job on the spot? Ethan asked, surprised. He usually only hires people with experience. You must have made a good impression. How long have you worked here? I asked, looking around the bustling room. This place seems cool. Started part-time after my 18th birthday last year, he said. You gotta be 18. Crap, I said. I won't be 18 until next May. Hey, he said, leaning in conspiratorially. If you want to work here next summer, I'll introduce you to Rick, the manager. He does the hiring. It'll give you a head start. My name's Lex, I said, my heart jumping at the prospect. Ethan made the introduction. Rick, a burly man with a kind face, looked me over. Let me see what Mr. Thompson has to say about you, he said. Check back with me next Wednesday. As we walked away, Ethan grinned. Don't be surprised if Rick offers you a part-time spot the first weekend after your birthday. I thanked him and left to get ready for work, my mind buzzing. Things were falling into place. My work was becoming routine, I had a place to hang out, and if things went well on Wednesday, I might already have my next summer job lined up. My life fell into a comfortable, predictable pattern. Work, sleep, laundry every third day, and hanging out at Richie's in between. My conversation with Rick, the manager, went well. The job for next summer was mine if I wanted it. Everything was going smoothly. On my next night off, I tagged along with a group from the rec center to a party. It was in one of those rundown hotels that also served as a rooming house, where as long as the weekly rent was paid, the management didn't care how many people were crammed into a room. The air was thick with music and smoke. As I scanned the crowded room, something glinted on the floor. I bent down and picked up a single, dangly earring, a silver wire holding 2 interlocking triangles. Anyone lose an earring? I asked the room at large. A girl with feathered hair glanced over. That's mine, but I don't want it. You can have it if you want. I held it in my palm. It felt like an omen, a challenge. A sudden, reckless idea sparked in my mind. Does anyone have any rubbing alcohol? I asked. I want to pierce my ear. The girl rummaged in her purse and produced a small bottle of astringent. It would have to do. I cleaned the wire and my right earlobe. Then, taking a sharp breath before I could lose my nerve, I pushed the silver wire through my flesh. I heard and felt the distinct pop as it went through. Just like that, a part of me had changed forever. At work the next night, the earring felt like it weighed a ton, pulling uncomfortably on the fresh wound. It was much bigger and flashier than I'd realized. Alice and Sarah spotted it the second I walked in. Lex, honey, that earring is a bit much, Sarah said kindly. Mr. Thompson isn't going to like it. I know, I winced, touching the tender lobe. It feels like it's going to rip my ear in two. Alice came over, her fingers quick and deft. She unhooked the dangling triangles, leaving just the simple silver wire loop in my ear. How's that? She asked. Feel better? The relief was instant. Yes, so much better. I didn't even think of doing that. Mr. Thompson won't mind that, Sarah said with a nod of approval. And that way your ear can heal properly. A month flew by in a haze of work and beach life. One afternoon at Richie's, a girl I'd never met came up to me while I was waiting for a foosball table. She nodded at my ear. Did you know, she said, that most gay guys have their right ear pierced like yours? No, I said, my voice neutral. I didn't know that. I walked away from the conversation and straight into the grimy bathroom. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I hadn't pierced my ear to send a signal to anyone. I had done it for me. For Lex. Without another thought, I took the silver wire out of my right ear, ran it under the hot water tap, and with 2 quick, determined motions, pierced my left earlobe right there in the mirror. That was the most important change I made to my appearance all summer. It felt like a point of no return. Once the left ear healed, both were pierced. I could wear a pair of earrings whenever I felt like it. I could be who I wanted to be, and I could have fun confusing people along the way. The summer was drawing to a close. I bought an old car from Mr. Thompson for $225, paying him a little each week. I figured if I came home with a car to show for my summer's work, Frank would see I'd been responsible. I gave my notice at the diner, wanting one last week of freedom before school started. And that's when everything went wrong. My last week of summer fun started badly. Someone stole my flip-flops while I was taking a final swim. I was left with only the black work shoes Alice had given me, better than nothing, but a sign that my carefree summer was over. 2 nights later, things got much worse. I was crashing in one of those no-questions-asked hotel rooms with a few people from the rec center, including a girl named Chloe. I was sound asleep on the floor when a flashlight beam exploded in my face. Shadowy figures loomed over me. "Get out of bed. Hands behind your back," a voice barked. I was still half asleep, my mind struggling to catch up as I was hauled to my feet. I felt the cold, sharp click of handcuffs around my wrists. The sound echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was fully clothed. We all were. There were no drugs, no alcohol, nothing illegal going on. We were just kids sleeping on a floor. "Excuse me, officer," I stammered, my voice shaking. "Why are we being handcuffed?" "For our safety while we conduct a search for drugs, alcohol, or weapons," he grunted. A few minutes later, another officer reported to the man in charge, "Chief, we didn't find anything." The chief of police stepped forward, his eyes filled with a furious frustration. He pointed a thick finger at me. "You're all being charged. Contributing to the delinquency of a minor, 2 counts. And cohabitation." My blood ran cold. "Jail." The words screamed in my head. That's when Chloe, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice steady and clear. "Daddy, if you arrest Lex for that, you have to arrest me too." The room went dead silent. "I'm not a minor anymore," she continued, looking her father straight in the eye. "My 16th birthday was last week. I guess you forgot." The chief of police froze, his face a thunderous mask of rage and defeat. He wasn't going to arrest his own daughter. He stalked over and roughly unlocked my cuffs. "All of you, get out of here," he snarled. "Now." We scrambled to leave. I was frantically looking for my shoes when the chief roared, "Go." Before I changed my mind, I found one of my work shoes, but the other was gone. One shoe was useless. I dropped it and fled out into the pre-dawn gloom. Outside, I turned to Chloe. "I didn't know your dad was the chief of police," I said, my voice still trembling with adrenaline. "But I am so glad I found out this way. I thought I was on my way to jail." I couldn't stay at the beach a moment longer. I felt like the chief would find any excuse to lock me up. With only 3 days of summer left, I decided the smart thing to do was just go home. I started the long walk to the edge of town to hitch a ride. A car finally pulled over. As I settled into the passenger seat, the driver, a middle-aged man, glanced over at me. "Sorry," he said, shaking his head. "For a second there, I thought you were a woman." This time, I didn't mind at all. In fact, for the first time, I smiled. It felt like a secret victory, a sign that even after the worst night of my life, I was still heading in the right direction. My own direction. The ride home was a quiet buffer between my 2 worlds. The man who'd picked me up dropped me off at the edge of the trailer park, and the familiar crunch of gravel under my shoes felt like a countdown. My brief, intoxicating summer of independence was over. Frank was in the living room, reading the paper, when I walked in. He looked up, his eyes immediately scanning me from head to toe. It wasn't a warm welcome, it was an inspection. "You're back early," he said, his voice flat. "Things got complicated," I replied, setting my bag down. It was time to come home. His gaze stopped, locking onto my head. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared. I knew what he was looking at. The single silver wire in my left earlobe, a mirror of the one in my right. I braced myself for the explosion, for a lecture on what men do and don't do. But it never came. Instead, a look of profound, weary disappointment settled over his features. He just shook his head slowly, a silent admission of defeat, and turned back to his newspaper. The silence was heavier and more damning than any shouting match could have been. The Board of Education was officially retired, replaced by a cold, unspoken truce. Later that evening, I broached the subject of the car. "I paid it off," I said, pulling the signed receipt from Mr. Thompson out of my wallet. "I have a car waiting for me at the beach. I just need my license." He examined the paper, his expression unreadable. "You turn 18 in May," he said, folding the receipt and handing it back. "You get your license then." Not before. It wasn't the flat-out no I had expected. It was a concession, a goalpost at the end of the long, dreary-looking school year. That night, in the familiar confinement of my small bedroom, the freedom of my room at the beach felt a million miles away. I unpacked my things, putting the work slacks and blouses at the very bottom of my drawer. Then, as a small act of defiance against the oppressive silence of the house, I took the silver wires and replaced them with a small pair of silver hoops I'd bought with my tip money. I looked at the girl in the mirror. She was still there. And she wasn't going away. The school year started, and my carefully constructed persona slipped back into place. My hair, now recovering from the barbershop massacre, was getting longer, and with 2 silver hoops in my ears, the long-haired hippie look was complete. It was the perfect camouflage. No one looked twice. I was just another artistic, slightly weird kid. My friendship with Leo deepened. We spent hours in his room, my fingers growing calloused as he patiently taught me new chords on the guitar he'd given me. He was completely oblivious to my other life, seeing only the friend he practiced music with. He saw Alex, and I let him. But at home, Lex had more room to breathe. With the money I'd saved from the summer, I quietly began to build a small collection. A tube of mascara. A pot of soft pink blush. An eyeshadow palette with muted browns and golds. I never wore it out of the house, but in the privacy of my own room, with the door locked, I would practice. The face in the mirror started to look less like a boy I knew and more like the girl I was becoming. The duality of my life was a constant balancing act. In my 5th period English class, the same one where I'd met my teacher who made poetry fun, I wrote a poem about friendship, thinking of Leo and the simple acceptance he offered. But that night, I would be in my room, carefully applying the crimson kiss lipstick Brenda had given me, feeling a sense of authenticity that eluded me in the school hallways. I was living in 2 separate worlds, and the strain of keeping them apart was beginning to show. The Cold War with Frank continued. We coexisted in the small trailer like ghosts, moving around each other, speaking only when absolutely necessary. His disapproval was a constant, low-grade hum in the background of my life. The inevitable finally happened one afternoon in late winter. I came home from school to find the door to my room slightly ajar. I never left it ajar. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I walked in and found Frank standing by my dresser, his back to me. He turned around slowly. In his hand, he held the evidence. It wasn't the slacks or the blouses, which were hidden deep in the bottom drawer. It was the small, velvet bag where I kept my makeup. He tipped it over, and the contents spilled onto my dresser. The Crimson Kiss lipstick, the mascara, the eyeshadow. "What is this, Alex?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. He only ever used my full name when he was furious. The air left my lungs. There was no light big enough to cover this. I just stood there, mute, my 2 worlds colliding in a silent, devastating explosion. "I have tried," he said, his voice raw with a pain I hadn't expected. "I have tried to understand this, to beat it out of you, to ignore it. But this..." He gestured to the makeup, a look of disgust on his face. "This ends. Now. All of it. You will get rid of this, you will cut your hair, and you will act like the man you are supposed to be. Or you are out of this house the second you turn 18. Do you understand me?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my eyes locked on the scattered pieces of my secret life, now exposed under the harsh light of his judgment. The countdown to my birthday had just become a ticking time bomb. The final months of the school year were a special kind of hell. I lived like a prisoner on parole, my every move scrutinized. I cut my bangs just enough to get Frank off my back, but let the rest grow, a small, stubborn act of rebellion. The makeup was gone, thrown away under his watchful eye. My room no longer felt like a sanctuary, it felt like a cell. My only focus was survival. May 24th. My 18th birthday. The day arrived not with celebration, but with the grim finality of a deadline. There was no cake, no happy birthday. I woke up, got dressed, and walked to the DMV. I passed the driving test with ease, and an hour later, I held a laminated piece of plastic with my picture on it. I was officially a licensed driver. I was officially an adult. My next stop was a bus station. I bought a one-way ticket to Carolina Beach. When I got there, I walked straight to the captain's table. Mr. Thompson was in his office. He smiled when he saw me. "Lex, I was wondering when I'd see you," he said. "Happy birthday. Ready to pick up your chariot?" He handed me the keys to the old, slightly rusted but reliable-looking sedan. "You drive safe now, you hear?" he said, his kindness a stark contrast to the cold silence I'd left behind. I took another bus back, got my things, and packed my one bag. This time, I didn't hide anything. Jeans and t-shirts lay next to the silver hoop earrings and a new tube of lipstick I'd bought on the way home. Frank was standing in the doorway of the living room as I walked out. He didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. I didn't look at him as I passed. I got into the car. The engine turned over on the first try. As I pulled out of the trailer park, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The road stretched out before me, leading east toward the rising sun, toward the salt spray, toward the life that was waiting for me. I was free,